21. Black celebrities who hid their diseases until death. What if we told you that some of the most powerful voices in Black history died in silence, smiling on stage while cancer, heart disease, and mental illness tore them apart behind the curtain? They didn't cry for help. They didn't want your pity. They wanted to leave the world remembering their strength, not their suffering. But today we uncover the pain they hid until their final breath. This is the story they never told. Before we begin, subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence because these aren't just deaths. They're warnings, legacies, and truths that demand to be heard. Luther Vandross. Luther Vandross was more than just a balladeer. He was the embodiment of romantic soul, the man behind timeless classics like Never Too Much and Here and Now. With over 35 million albums sold worldwide, he captivated hearts across generations. Yet behind the elegance of his voice and the glimmering spotlight he stood in, Vandross lived a life haunted by illness, one he chose to keep locked away from the public. In his early years, Luther's health already hinted at complications. Struggles with weight were visible throughout his career, fluctuating dramatically due to stress dieting and later undisclosed medical issues. Diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and hypertension, Vandross was well aware that his body was under siege. These silent enemies ravaged his system slowly but relentlessly, weakening his cardiovascular health even as he smiled under stage lights. But Vandross was determined not to appear fragile. In an industry that often equates illness with irrelevance, he masked his symptoms. Public appearances remained polished and interviews were tightly controlled. Even as fatigue set in and his balance wavered, he refused to let anyone beyond his closest circle see the deterioration. He feared being reduced to a sick man who used to sing rather than the living legend he still was. On April 16, 2003, that private war came crashing into the open. Vandross suffered a massive ischemic stroke in his Manhattan apartment. It left him in a coma for nearly 2 months, paralyzed on his left side and without his signature voice. The news shocked the world not only because of the event itself, but because no one knew how vulnerable he had become. Despite immense effort in rehabilitation, Vandross never performed publicly again. His final appearance was at the 2004 Grammy Awards via a pre-recorded message where he accepted the award for Song of the Year with Dance with My Father. Frail but still dignified, it was the last glimpse the world would have of the man they once saw as unstoppable. On July 1, 2005, at just 54 years old, Luther Vandross passed away due to a heart attack linked to his earlier stroke and ongoing health complications. No tabloid frenzy, no exploitative images, just silence, dignity, and deep sorrow from millions of fans. His story remains a poignant example of grace under pressure. Luther Vandross didn't want pity. He wanted his legacy to remain unblemished by the suffering he endured. And in doing so, he left behind not just a catalog of beautiful music, but a heartbreaking lesson in the invisible strength of those we idolize. Bernie Mac. Bernie Mac had a laugh that shook walls and a presence that owned every room. From stand-up stages to blockbuster films like Ocean's 11 and Mr. 3000, he was known as one of the original kings of comedy. But what his millions of fans never saw was the quiet daily war he waged against an incurable illness, sarcoidosis, a disease that scars the lungs and can lead to respiratory failure. Diagnosed in 1983, Mac chose early on to keep his condition out of the public eye. Sarcoidosis is a rare autoimmune disorder, and while it may remain dormant for years when it flares, it causes extreme fatigue, breathing issues, and chronic pain. For decades, Bernie refused to let it define him. He believed that his job was to make people laugh, not to make them worry. So he pressed forward through coughing fits, through sleepless nights, and through bouts of breathlessness that often made it difficult to complete scenes on set. Even his close friends and co-stars were largely unaware of the severity of his condition. He covered his symptoms with energy, charisma, and an iron will to keep performing. Behind the camera, however, he sometimes had to rest between takes, managing his condition with medication and sheer determination. In 2008, everything changed. A bout of pneumonia caused by his weakened immune system triggered a rapid decline. He was admitted to a Chicago hospital in late July, and within days his condition worsened. On August 9th, Bernie Mac passed away due to complications from pneumonia. He was only 50 years old. His death was a shock to fans and colleagues alike, not because he had passed, but because so few knew how close to the edge he had been. Even in the face of death, Bernie Mac never sought sympathy. He saw vulnerability as private sacred. Today, Bernie's legacy isn't just built on laughter. It's built on a rare kind of courage, the kind that performs through pain and leaves the audience smiling, never knowing the cost. He proved that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in silence behind the scenes where legends refuse to let illness steal their joy. Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick Boseman became a global icon as T'Challa the Black Panther, a role that defined power, dignity, and pride. But behind the scenes, Boseman was living a very real battle. In 2016, he was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer, which later progressed to stage 4. Yet, astonishingly, he never shared this publicly. Over the next 4 years, as the disease advanced, he continued working on films that demanded physical endurance, emotional depth, and an unwavering presence. He filmed Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, Da 5 Bloods, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, all while undergoing chemotherapy and multiple surgeries. On set, no one would have guessed the toll cancer was taking on his body. He trained, fought, and performed with relentless drive. Even as his frame grew thinner, his spirit never wavered. Boseman's silence was deliberate. In interviews, he deflected attention from himself, focusing instead on uplifting others, particularly the Black community and those facing adversity. He visited children with cancer in hospitals while secretly battling the disease himself. His mission was clear: the world would only see him as a symbol of hope, never of suffering. His health began to deteriorate rapidly in early 2020. But he still completed the filming of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, delivering a performance that would earn him a posthumous Golden Globe Award and an Academy Award nomination. On August 28, 2020, Chadwick Boseman died at home surrounded by family. He was just 43 years old. The news came as a thunderbolt. Not a single leak, no media speculation, just the raw shock that someone so young, so gifted had endured so much without ever letting the world see. His legacy is now etched in more than cinema. Chadwick Boseman redefined quiet resilience. He showed that true heroism doesn't just live on screen, it lives in how we carry pain without letting it break our purpose. In the end, his silence wasn't weakness. It was grace. Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman was the very definition of elegance and emotional depth. With a voice that moved effortlessly from sorrow to seduction, she gave the world unforgettable songs like You Know How to Love Me and Living All Alone. But what audiences never realized was that those aching lyrics weren't just performances, they were her reality. Behind the spotlight, Hyman fought a long, quiet battle against clinical depression and bipolar disorder, a war that intensified in silence as her fame grew. Rising to prominence in the late 1970s, Hyman was often praised for her beauty and stage presence. But behind the glamour, she struggled with feelings of inadequacy and chronic loneliness. Her mental health issues were compounded by professional challenges. Record labels mishandled her career, radio stations failed to support her later albums, and financial instability weighed heavily on her shoulders. As the industry overlooked her, her sense of worth began to unravel. Rather than share her inner turmoil, Phyllis chose to present strength to the world. She smiled during interviews, belted powerful ballads on stage, and maintained an image of sophistication. Yet privately, she was relying on sedatives, antidepressants, and alcohol just to get through the day. Her journals revealed thoughts of despair, even as fans cheered her performances. On June 30th, 1995, hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater, Phyllis took her own life. She was only 45 years old. A suicide note was found on her nightstand reading, "I'm tired. I'm tired. Those of you that I love know who you are. May God bless you." The tragedy sent shockwaves through the music industry. Fans and fellow artists were heartbroken not just by her death, but by the knowledge that no one had truly seen her suffering. Phyllis Hyman's story is a haunting reminder that depression doesn't always look like sadness. It can wear a sequin gown, hold a microphone, and sing as if nothing is wrong. She remains one of the most underrated talents of her generation, a woman whose voice could heal others but couldn't save herself. Her legacy lives on in her music, but also in the cautionary tale she left behind. Check on the strong ones, they might be hiding the deepest pain. Etta James. Etta James was raw, powerful, and timeless. With a career spanning over 5 decades, she carved her name into music history with soulful classics like "At Last I'd Rather Go Blind" and "Tell Mama." Her voice was unforgettable, sultry, stormy, and full of fire. But as the years wore on, her body became the battleground for a quiet and devastating struggle with multiple health crises. In the mid-2000s, James was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, leukemia, and severe kidney failure. Despite the mounting toll on her health, she remained determined to maintain her image as a commanding performer. She continued to make appearances and sing when she could, never letting the public see the vulnerability that was consuming her behind closed doors. She had already lived a life marked by hardship, battling addiction in earlier decades, and surviving personal tragedies with grit. But her final years were a different kind of torment. Chemotherapy sessions left her weak, disoriented, and in constant pain. Her weight dropped dramatically, her memory began to falter, and the once fiery woman became increasingly reclusive. Still, few outside her inner circle were aware of the severity of her condition. In 2010, she made one of her final public performances, fragile in stature but radiant in presence. Fans had no idea it would be among her last. By 2011, her condition worsened. The cancer advanced aggressively, spreading throughout her bone marrow. She was placed under 24-hour care at her home, and even then she remained stoic, rarely speaking of her illness publicly. On January 20th, 2012, Etta James passed away at age 73. Her death marked the end of an era, but it also revealed how much she had endured without ever asking for pity. The public remembered her as fierce and unforgettable, never frail or fading. Her story is one of resilience, a woman who didn't want the world to mourn her while she lived. Etta James died the same way she sang, with strength, pain, and a voice that left a mark on every soul it touched. Heavy D. Heavy D. Born Dwight Arrington. Myers was a pioneer of upbeat, feel-good hip-hop. Known for hits like "Now That We Found Love" and "Big Daddy," he brought charisma, energy, and a sense of joy to rap music at a time when the genre was rapidly evolving. But despite his vibrant image, Heavy D's final days were marked by a sudden and tragic health crisis that took his life without warning. In the early 90s, Heavy D was everywhere, on stage, on television, and even in film. He was celebrated not just for his lyrical flow, but for breaking the mold of what a hip-hop star could be. Behind the scenes, however, health concerns were gradually building. He began to take better care of himself, losing a significant amount of weight later in life. But inside, something was still dangerously wrong. On November 8, 2011, as he stepped outside his Beverly Hills home, he experienced intense chest pain. Moments later, he collapsed on the sidewalk. Bystanders called for emergency help, and Heavy D was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Despite the efforts of doctors, he was pronounced dead within hours. He was only 44 years old. The cause of death was determined to be pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that traveled to his lungs, cutting off oxygen and causing cardiac arrest. It was linked to a long flight he had recently taken from Europe, combined with deep vein thrombosis. This condition, though often preventable, is also frequently undetected until it's too late. What made his death so shocking was its abruptness. There had been no public signs of illness, no indication that the man who had just performed at the BET Hip Hop Awards weeks earlier was in danger. His passing reminded fans that even the most energetic performers could be hiding critical health issues. Heavy D's legacy endures as a symbol of positivity and versatility in hip-hop. He was more than a rapper. He was a producer, actor, and trendsetter. But his final moment was a chilling reminder that fame and success offer no immunity from the silent threats within. Isaac Hayes. Isaac Hayes wasn't just a musician, he was a cultural force. With his deep baritone signature shaved head and gold chains, he redefined soul music in the 1970s. He won an Academy Award for his theme to Shaft and helped lay the foundation for Southern soul at Stax Records. But while his voice boomed with strength, his body was quietly giving out. In the 2000s, Hayes began experiencing symptoms related to chronic high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. Those closest to him noticed moments of confusion, fatigue, and shortness of breath. Still, Isaac downplayed his condition. He never publicly acknowledged any illness and kept up appearances with a demeanor of strength and serenity. He remained active professionally, scoring films, touring, and even voicing the character of Chef on South Park, but his body was signaling distress. In 2006, he suffered a stroke, which he also kept largely out of the public eye. Then, on August 10, 2008, Hayes was found unresponsive next to his running treadmill in his Memphis home. It was his wife who discovered him. Paramedics arrived, but it was too late. At just 65 years old, Isaac Hayes was gone. The official cause of death was listed as stroke and cardiovascular disease. Autopsy reports confirmed that his heart had been slowly deteriorating over time. Yet to the public, he never showed signs of struggle. He never sought sympathy. No last interviews detailing his health. Just silence. His death left a profound void in both the music world and Black cultural history. Isaac Hayes helped give soul music its cinematic grandeur and emotional gravity. But in the end, the man who gave voice to strength and revolution kept his own vulnerability locked away. He died with dignity, but also with secrets. And that silence, like his music, still echoes today. Florence Griffith Joyner. Florence Griffith Joyner, affectionately known as FloJo, was a dazzling force of athleticism and flair. With her flowing hair, glittering one-legged bodysuits, and gold-painted fingernails, she not only shattered world records, but redefined what it meant to be a female sports icon. At the 1988 Seoul Olympics, she stunned the world by winning 3 gold medals and 1 silver, setting a still-standing world record in the 100 meters at 10:49 seconds. But behind the speed and style was a woman living with a secret, a potentially fatal health condition that would later claim her life. After retiring from track and field in the early 1990s, FloJo remained active in the public eye, dabbling in fashion, fitness, and philanthropy. Despite her glowing image, she began experiencing recurring seizures and serious headaches, symptoms she mostly kept private. Reports indicate that she had been diagnosed with a brain abnormality, later revealed to be an epileptic condition. However, like many high achievers, she chose not to make her health battles public. She kept smiling, traveling, and inspiring others as if nothing was wrong. Then, in the early hours of September 21, 1998, at just 38 years old, Florence passed away suddenly in her sleep. Her husband, Olympic triple jump champion Al Joyner, found her unresponsive. The cause, an epileptic seizure caused by a congenital vascular brain abnormality. She had likely known about the risk, but chose to face it quietly. Her shocking death sparked conspiracy theories and speculation, none of which were backed by evidence. The autopsy confirmed there were no drugs or performance enhancers in her system. FloJo died as she had lived, unexpectedly, boldly, and privately. Her story is one of beauty, power, and tragic silence. In trying to protect her image, she hid her struggle. Yet in death, she became more than a sprinter. She became a legend of quiet resilience. Barry White. Barry White's voice was an instrument of seduction. Deep, velvety, and unmistakably sensual, he serenaded generations with timeless hits like "Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe" and "You're the First, the Last, My Everything." Known as the Maestro of Love, he was adored for his romantic ballads, charismatic presence, and full-bodied baritone. Yet beneath that suave exterior, Barry White was facing a slow, painful decline he never broadcast to the public. Throughout his life, Barry struggled with chronic high blood pressure and obesity, which led to increasingly serious complications. By the early 2000s, his health was failing. He developed kidney disease so severe that he was placed on dialysis. Despite the treatments, he insisted on continuing his music career. He didn't want fans to associate him with sickness. He wanted to be remembered as a strong performer, not a fragile man in decline. As his condition worsened, he was hospitalized in April 2003 due to kidney failure. A few weeks later, he suffered a massive stroke, which left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak. The cruelest twist for a man whose life had been defined by his voice was losing the ability to use it. Still, Barry never allowed the media to capture him in a diminished state. No hospital bed photos, no final interview. Just the memory of a man who once made the world swoon. On July 4, 2003, Barry White died in Los Angeles at 58 years old. He left behind a legacy of romance and musical elegance, but also a reminder that even the most confident figures may be hiding their deepest pain. His story underscores the duality of stardom, the applause on stage, and the quiet agony behind closed doors. Barry White chose love as his message, and in shielding the world from his suffering, he ensured that love, not illness, would define his memory. Gerald Levert. Gerald Levert was sole royalty son of O'Jays lead singer Eddie Levert, a powerhouse vocalist in his own right, and a heartthrob for fans of 1990s R&B. With hits like "Baby I'm Ready" and "Made to Love Ya," he captured raw emotional truths with the kind of passion that felt lived in. But while his music overflowed with sincerity, Gerald kept one truth hidden from everyone: the physical pain that quietly consumed him. In the spotlight, Gerald exuded strength. His voice was bold, his body sturdy, and his smile infectious. But offstage, he was dealing with persistent, debilitating pain. Years of performing, travel stress, and untreated health issues wore on him. He suffered from chronic back pain and insomnia, and in an effort to stay functional and upbeat, he turned to a combination of prescription medications, painkillers, sedatives, and anti-anxiety drugs. No one suspected just how heavily he relied on them. Friends described him as focused and vibrant, especially in the days leading up to his death. He was in the middle of working on new music when on November 10, 2006, at just 40 years old, Gerald was found unresponsive in his Cleveland home. The world lost a voice that still had so much more to give. The coroner later confirmed the cause of death as acute intoxication from a mix of prescription medications. While all were legally obtained, the combination proved fatal. It wasn't an intentional overdose. It was a man trying to manage his pain and function at a high level, unwilling to show weakness or slow down. Gerald Levert died, as many do, in silence, not from one disease, but from years of untreated discomfort and an expectation to always be strong. His story serves as a heartbreaking reminder that even those who sing about love and healing may never find relief themselves. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was a musical visionary, an artist whose voice carried the weight of the Black experience with unmatched tenderness and complexity. Songs like "A Song for You" and "Someday We'll All Be Free" weren't just melodies, they were soul-deep reflections of a man grappling with a mind that increasingly betrayed him. Behind the genius was a battle with paranoid schizophrenia, a condition that would ultimately take his life. Diagnosed in the early 1970s, Hathaway experienced terrifying delusions, hallucinations, and extreme paranoia. He often believed that people were trying to harm him or control his thoughts. Yet even amid these debilitating episodes, he created music that touched hearts and uplifted spirits. He recorded timeless duets with Roberta Flack and brought gospel, jazz, and soul together in ways that critics still study. Despite his brilliance, Donnie's condition deteriorated over time. He was hospitalized multiple times, and friends recalled episodes where he would talk to himself or become emotionally unreachable. Still, he fought to keep working even while his inner world crumbled. In 1979, he was trying to rekindle his career and had just finished a recording session with Roberta Flack when something snapped. On January 13, 1979, Hathaway was found dead on the sidewalk beneath the 15th floor of New York's Essex House Hotel. His room was locked from the inside. It was ruled a suicide, but for many who loved him, it was the end of a lifelong battle that music alone could not cure. Donny Hathaway's death was not simply the result of illness. It was the culmination of years spent wrestling with a reality that few could understand. He didn't die forgotten. He died unheard even as his voice reached millions. In remembering Donny, we must not only celebrate the beauty he created, but acknowledge the pain he endured. His music gave hope to countless others, but his own plea for peace came in a silence that no song could heal. Natalie Cole. Natalie Cole lived under a long golden shadow, that of her father Nat King Cole. But she didn't just carry the legacy, she carved her own. With chart-topping hits like This Will Be and Miss You Like Crazy and her iconic Unforgettable, with Love tribute album, Natalie redefined success in her own right. Yet beneath her elegance and vocal brilliance was a woman quietly fighting for her life again and again. Natalie's early career was nearly derailed by drug addiction, a period she later bravely confronted in her memoirs. After recovering in the 1980s, she made a triumphant comeback, but the damage done during those years would linger quietly inside her body. In 2008, she was diagnosed with hepatitis C, a virus she contracted decades earlier through intravenous drug use. The announcement shocked fans not only for its seriousness, but for how long she had hidden the disease. Hepatitis C began to deteriorate her liver rapidly. As she underwent aggressive chemotherapy treatments, Natalie continued to perform Smile and pose for press, always dressed in grace, never hinting at the agony behind the image. But the toll grew severe. Her kidneys failed as a result of the treatment, and in 2009, she underwent a life-saving kidney transplant. Even then, she refused pity. She returned to the stage recording and touring, presenting a radiant facade the public never questioned. Yet behind the scenes, Natalie was deeply fatigued. Chronic pain, nausea, and internal organ stress became part of her daily routine. Few knew the extent of her suffering. In her final years, her health declined sharply, but she kept it private. On December 31, 2015, the world welcomed a new year while Natalie Cole took her final breath at age 65 in a Los Angeles hospital. Cause of death: congestive heart failure resulting from her lifelong health complications. Her death was met with collective mourning, not just for the music, but for the burden she carried so quietly. Natalie Cole's legacy is layered, one of talent, triumph, and a heartbreaking endurance that she never let define her publicly. She sang through storms the world never saw. Andre Waters. Andre Waters was the embodiment of fearless football. Known as one of the hardest-hitting safeties in NFL history, he built his reputation on explosive tackles and relentless intensity while playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. But while fans praised his power, what no one saw was how every collision slowly chipped away at his mind until the damage became irreversible. Waters retired from the NFL in 1995 after an 11-year career filled with accolades and concussions. Known as Dirty Waters for his aggressive style, he was often fined for hits that would later be understood as dangerously traumatic. After leaving the game, Andre began experiencing symptoms that no one, including himself, could explain. He struggled with depression, forgetfulness, and mood swings. At first, he chalked it up to stress. But over time, his mental health rapidly declined. Though he tried to stay connected to football by coaching, his emotional instability deepened. He became withdrawn, and his once bright demeanor was often clouded by silence and anger. Still, he said nothing. Like many men of his era, and especially black men raised in a culture of toughness, Andre believed vulnerability was weakness. On November 20th, 2006, Waters was found dead in his Tampa home. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was only 44 years old. His death sent shockwaves through the sports world. In the aftermath, his brain was sent to neuropathologist Dr. Bennett Omalu, who diagnosed Waters with chronic traumatic encephalopathy (CTE), a degenerative brain condition caused by repeated head trauma. Dr. Omalu stated that Waters had the brain of an 85-year-old man with Alzheimer's. Waters never knew the cause of his suffering. He thought he was losing his mind when, in truth, football had taken it from him one hit at a time. His death changed how the NFL looked at player safety and sparked new discussions about mental health in sports. Andre Waters was a hero on the field, but he died feeling broken and unseen. His story isn't just tragic, it's a call to listen before it's too late. Harold Hunter. Harold Hunter was more than just a skateboarder. He was a New York City icon. Known for his electrifying presence in Kids 1995, and as one of the first black skaters to rise to national prominence, Harold wasn't just good at skating, he lived it. Whether soaring off stair sets in the Lower East Side or lighting up a room with his gritty humor, Harold embodied the raw, unfiltered spirit of the underground. But underneath the energy and charisma was a young man spiraling from the inside out. Born and raised in Manhattan's housing projects, Hunter's path to fame was anything but smooth. Skateboarding offered an escape, and he turned that passion into a career. Sponsorships, endorsements, and fame followed, but so did the pressure. As success came, so did substance abuse. Friends recall wild nights, erratic behavior, and a constant hunger to stay relevant in a world that moved quickly and unforgivingly. Hunter battled addiction, a fight often hidden beneath his public persona. The very city he helped define began closing in on him. He was no longer the fresh-faced kid with limitless energy. He was aging, and the sponsorships faded. The parties got longer, the quiet moments darker. On February 17, 2006, at just 31 years old, Harold Hunter was found dead in his apartment in Manhattan. The cause was a heart attack triggered by cocaine use. There were no warning signs, no final messages, just a sudden collapse of a life lived at full speed. His death was a gut punch to the skateboarding world. Tributes poured in from fans, skaters, and the city he loved. But beneath the grief was a painful realization Harold had been hurting long before he fell. He never wore his pain on his sleeve. He laughed louder than most, lived harder than most, but left too soon like a shooting star burning out mid-flight. In his memory, the Harold Hunter Foundation now works to provide opportunities to underprivileged youth, ensuring his legacy serves a purpose far beyond the half-pipe. David Ruffin. David Ruffin's voice was a thunderclap of heartbreak and desire. As the lead singer of The Temptations during their golden era, he turned My Girl and Ain't Too Proud to beg into timeless anthems. With his trademark glasses and urgent stage presence, Ruffin wasn't just singing, he was bleeding emotion. But away from the mic, he was collapsing into addiction, illness, and a brutal kind of isolation. Despite his fame, Ruffin's career was marked by volatility. His erratic behavior led to his departure from The Temptations in 1968, and while he enjoyed moderate solo success, his personal demons took center stage. He became entangled in substance abuse, frequently cycling through rehabilitation and relapse. Still, he kept performing often in smaller venues where fans hoped to see a glimmer of the greatness he once embodied. Privately, Ruffin was suffering from chronic heart disease compounded by his drug use. He was often seen gasping for breath between sets, clutching his chest while refusing medical attention. His once powerful frame had withered, but he hid his pain beneath oversized suits and stage makeup. He didn't want pity. He wanted applause. On June 1st, 1991, David Ruffin collapsed in a Philadelphia crack house after a drug overdose. He was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. He was 50 years old. Though the official cause was an overdose, many believed it was the culmination of years of untreated illness, loneliness, and neglect. Ruffin's death exposed the tragic underbelly of fame, the silence, the abandonment, the slow fade of a once dazzling life. He died without fanfare, no entourage, no sold-out arena. Just the echo of a voice that once defined a generation. But his legacy remains. Every time My Girl plays, a piece of David lives on his pain, his brilliance, his plea to be loved, not forgotten. Wilson Pickett. Wilson Pickett's name was synonymous with raw, electric soul. With chart-topping classics like In the Midnight Hour, Mustang Sally, and Land of 1,000 Dances, Pickett's voice didn't just sing, it thundered. His gritty delivery, explosive energy, and magnetic stage presence made him a defining voice of 1960s R&B. But behind the power and bravado was a man slowly being undone by untreated illness and decades of silent suffering. Throughout his career, Pickett lived a hard-driving life. His performances were grueling, and his offstage lifestyle was equally intense. Years of excessive touring, substance use, and personal battles took a toll on his body. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, those consequences began to manifest in ominous ways. He started experiencing chronic chest pain, frequent fatigue, and symptoms that pointed to serious cardiovascular problems. But Pickett, known for his unshakable image, refused to let anyone know. He avoided hospitals, declined detailed interviews about his health, and brushed off concerns with a confident smile. To him, slowing down meant giving in, and that was never his style. But the damage couldn't be masked forever. On January 19, 2006, at the age of 64, Wilson Pickett died of a heart attack at a hospital in Reston, Virginia. The official cause was a culmination of atherosclerosis and heart failure conditions that had been progressing for years without treatment. The public was shocked, but those closest to him revealed the truth. Wilson had known he was sick. He just didn't want anyone to see him as weak. He'd rather be remembered as the sole firebrand who roared into a mic than the aging man too tired to climb the stage steps. Wilson Pickett left a trailblazing legacy, one built on sound style and sheer force. But in choosing to hide his health, he became another soul legend whose final notes played in silence. He died as he lived on his own terms with no apologies. Reggie White. Reggie White was a football icon. Nicknamed the Minister of Defense, he was one of the most feared defensive linemen in NFL history, with 198 career sacks, a record at the time of his retirement. A two-time NFL Defensive Player of the Year Super Bowl champion with the Green Bay Packers and ordained Minister White was known for his blend of brute force on the field and deep spirituality off it. But even Titans have vulnerabilities, and Reggie's was hidden inside his chest, chronic heart and respiratory conditions that he kept mostly private despite mounting warning signs. After retiring from the NFL in 2000, White remained active, giving motivational speeches and participating in charity work. However, he began experiencing sleep apnea, a condition that disrupts breathing during sleep and significantly increases the risk of heart failure. His breathing would stop repeatedly during the night, sometimes for over a minute at a time. Doctors had advised him to take the condition seriously, but like many athletes used to pushing through pain, Reggie downplayed its severity. His heart, already strained from years of physical punishment and untreated sleep disorders, began to weaken. But to the public, he still looked like the unstoppable giant they had admired for decades. On December 26, 2004, at just 43 years old, Reggie White died suddenly in his sleep. The official cause was arrhythmia, related to cardiac and pulmonary sarcoidosis, a rare inflammatory disease that had severely impacted his lungs and heart. His passing was a wake-up call to the sports world about the dangers of untreated sleep apnea and the invisible toll of life after football. Reggie White's death devastated not just fans, but the broader community that saw him as a hero and role model. He was a man of immense power, faith, and discipline, but also one who bore his health struggles quietly. His legacy as one of the greatest to ever play the game remains intact, but now also stands as a reminder even giants fall, especially when their pain stays hidden. Bill Nunn. Bill Nunn was never one to chase the spotlight, but his presence on screen was unforgettable. Most remember him as Radio Raheem in Do the Right Thing, a towering, wordless figure with booming speakers and a message of love versus hate strapped to his fists. Others recall his sharp, composed role as Joseph Robbie Robertson in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. Whether playing a symbol of cultural rage or a voice of moral steadiness, Nunn commanded attention. Yet when illness began to dim his light, he slipped into the shadows without a word. In 2015, Nunn was diagnosed with leukemia, a form of blood cancer that often progresses slowly, but can become life-threatening if untreated or unchecked. Nunn's choice was not to share the diagnosis publicly, not with fans, not with the press. Only a close circle of friends and family knew. True to his nature, Bill continued working for as long as he could. He mentored young actors, remained engaged with the theater community in Pittsburgh, and stayed active in causes that mattered to him. He never appeared frail in public, never gave interviews hinting at a farewell. If there were signs of decline, he concealed them behind his famously calm demeanor. But the disease was advancing. In the final months, his energy waned and his strength diminished. Even then, he refused to let illness define his legacy. On September 24, 2016, Bill Nunn passed away in his Pittsburgh home at the age of 62. The news came suddenly to most. It was the first many had heard of his illness, and the shock was deep. For such a steady on-screen presence to vanish so quietly off-screen felt jarring. His death wasn't dramatic, but it was devastating. Bill Nunn never asked for attention or sympathy. He acted with dignity in life and departed with the same grace. In choosing silence, he ensured that the world would remember his work, not his suffering. Nell Carter. Nell Carter was a firecracker of talent. She burst onto the scene in the late 1970s with her Tony Award-winning performance in Ain't Misbehavin', and later charmed television audiences in the hit sitcom Gimme a Break. Her voice was thunderous, her comedic timing flawless, and her energy infectious. But beneath the laughter, Nell was living with chronic illness that drained her from the inside out. Carter had long battled type 2 diabetes, a condition she kept mostly private, even as it silently damaged her health. She was also diagnosed with high blood pressure and had a brain aneurysm, a ticking time bomb doctors warned could rupture at any moment. Still, she refused to slow down. She starred in television movies, toured on stage, and raised 3 children, 2 adopted and 1 biological, all while carrying the weight of invisible suffering. Friends noted that she often seemed fatigued, short of breath, and occasionally needed long periods of rest after performances. But Nell, fiercely independent, pushed through every obstacle. She managed her condition with medication, determination, and willpower, but rarely spoke of the fear that lingered behind her eyes. On January 23, 2003, Nell Carter was found collapsed in her Beverly Hills home. She had been planning to film a new pilot for a sitcom comeback. The cause of death was ruled as heart disease complicated by diabetes. She was only 54 years old. Her passing sent a wave of grief through the entertainment industry. For fans, it was not just the loss of a beloved performer, it was the loss of someone who gave joy even while quietly enduring pain. Many were stunned to learn how serious her health issues had been. Nell Carter never let illness define her. She made the world laugh, sing, and feel. And though her body gave out too soon, her light continues to shine, proof that some stars burn brightest just before they fade. Eartha Kitt. Eartha Kitt was a force of nature, sultry, sharp, and unapologetically original. With a career spanning 6 decades, she conquered Broadway, film, television, and music with unmatched flair. Whether purring her way through Santa Baby or electrifying screens as Catwoman Kit oozed charisma. But her fiercest performance came in her final years, not on stage, but in silence as she battled a deadly illness far from the public's eye. In the mid-2000s, Kit was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. Known for her independence and dignity, she made a conscious decision not to disclose her condition publicly. The diagnosis, grim and progressive, didn't stop her. She continued to perform, travel, and do interviews, showing no outward sign of the excruciating pain she often endured. Only a few in her inner circle knew of the suffering she hid beneath red lipstick and commanding elegance. Friends recall that even while undergoing chemotherapy, Eartha maintained her witty defiance. She once said, "I'm still me, darling," just with a few more battle scars. She refused to let the illness define her, maintaining her signature sass until her final days. No dramatic press statements, no photographs in hospital beds, only grace and strength. Even when the cancer spread and her health rapidly declined, Eartha kept her final act private. On December 25, 2008, while families celebrated Christmas, Eartha Kitt passed away at age 81 in her Connecticut home. The world didn't know she was dying. When the news broke, fans were stunned. She had kept the disease so well hidden that even longtime followers believed she was as unstoppable as ever. Her death marked the end of an era, yet it also unveiled the iron will of a woman who refused to be remembered as frail. Eartha Kitt didn't just fight cancer. She outperformed it until her last breath. Gregory Hines. Gregory Hines was rhythm incarnate. A tap-dancing legend, actor, singer, and Broadway star, Hines turned footwork into poetry. With credits like White Nights, The Cotton Club, and Jelly's Last Jam, he made every movement an act of storytelling. But while his feet dazzled and his smile charmed, Hines kept a devastating truth secret: he was dying from liver cancer. Diagnosed in 2002, Hines chose not to share the news with fans or even many friends. Ever the performer, he didn't want sympathy or headlines about his health. His goal was to keep creating. He continued acting, working on television projects like Will and Grace, and making appearances as if nothing were wrong. But his body was changing. He began to tire more easily, and his once fluid movements slowed. Even then, he never stopped working. Those who saw him during this period described him as thinner, quieter, but still radiating the warmth that made him beloved. Privately, Hines was undergoing treatment, knowing the prognosis wasn't favorable. But not once did he exploit his condition for attention. His silence was not shame, it was self-respect. He wanted the world to remember Gregory Hines, the artist, not Gregory Hines, the patient. On August 9, 2003, he passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 57. The news came as a complete shock. There were no public farewells, no tearful interviews, just sudden absence and an outpouring of grief from those who had no idea he had been sick. Hines's death left a void in the world of performance art, but his decision to suffer in silence highlighted a deeper truth: he lived and died on his own terms. He danced until his body gave out, never letting illness define the man whose feet once made stages quake. They gave us music, laughter, pride, and strength, but behind the applause, these 21 icons carried burdens we never saw. Now that the silence has lifted, one question remains. Should celebrities have to suffer in secret to protect their legacy, or would showing their struggle have empowered others? At Legends of Black Excellence, we believe every untold story deserves a voice. Which of these stars' hidden battles moved you the most, and do you think society makes it too hard for our heroes to show weakness? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Their story might be over, but the conversation starts with you.